Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans, just college sports fans across the nation and around the world. This is the Tim Bain Show featuring, wait a minute, you're not Clay Hall. Who in the hell are you?
Just Jerry.
Just Jerry, ladies and gentlemen. Jerry Emig. Long time. I can't ever get the years right because there was a sabbatical, but long time sports information director at Ohio State. In essence, over football. That's where he and I ran into each other often. Before that, he was the sports information director at Temple, where he, I don't know, what do you call it, ran herd over John Chaney. Did anybody ever run herd over John Chaney, the legendary Temple basketball coach?
No, but you also didn't need to.
No.
You know, he was such a quality individual. You know,
Yeah.
people saw this bear, of a human on the sideline.
The TV highlights.
Yeah, but that was on, or that was on the court, and that was during the game.
Yeah.
When the game was over, heart of gold.
Yeah.
Wonderful person.
Oh yeah. I got to cover him several times when we would at the Dispatch, we'd cover different regionals and stuff. And I'll never forget about him making that long slog up the ramp at UD Arena, University of Dayton Arena. I didn't think he was going to make it, to be honest with you. But just one of those things. But I mean, some of the highlights of him after games and stuff, like him and John Calipari one time got into it.
Yeah.
And, you can look all this up on YouTube. But what a character John Chaney was. And I mean that in a good way, But then went on. I just want to give the highlights before we move into some conversation here, because one of the main reasons I've got you on, Jerry, for the first time ever, obviously I had you on a radio show I was on the day you retired from Ohio State back in what was that, February, right?
February 28th.
February 28th. I was on a radio show and co-hosting a radio show and had you on and enjoyed that conversation, but that was 9 minutes. This is as long as we want to make it.
And DeVere Posey was taking some of your questions.
Yes, DeVere.
Wonderful person.
That's
too.
the only bad thing about having a co-host is they think they also get to ask questions. But I digress. Bottom line is it was cool having you on then. But, you and I could have like 15 of these shows and not hit all the points that are interesting to me. So we'll hit a few of them in this show and have you back and then have you back. And you know what? I don't care if somebody out there cares or not about me and you talking, because I've always enjoyed talking with you.
Mm-hmm.
You see where I'm going?
Yeah. We've had a really good relationship over the years, so it's good to be able to continue it.
Yeah, and now that you can say a few things from behind the scenes that you weren't able to say during the day, you don't have to, air dirty underwear unless you feel like it, unless you have some laundry to do. But the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, he came to Ohio State from Temple, was the football, I guess, for one. I'm just going to say everything football SID at Ohio State under John Cooper. Took a sabbatical. You remember your sabbatical?
I do.
Yeah. Took a sabbatical. Was a forced sabbatical?
It was.
Yeah, it was a forced sabbatical.
Yeah.
But, got his act together, got his act cleaned up, came back, worked under Jim Tressel for a little while, was there when Luke Fickell needed some steerage during the transition to what became known as the Urban Meyer era. And then, of course, after that, the Ryan Day era. And as I told you before we started, you will have worked under John Chaney's already in some Hall of Fame, isn't he? John Cooper's in the College Football Hall of Fame. Urban Meyer's in the College Football Hall of Fame. Luke Fickell, wow, if he would get out now, he might get in the Hall of Fame. I don't mean to be a smart aleck, but Wisconsin has not been the promised land thus far for Luke Fickell. We'll see with the Wisconsin legislature even getting into making sure they don't fall way behind in terms of paying athletes. We'll get into that in a minute also. Right. And, of course, Ryan Day is pell-mell headed toward the College Football Hall of Fame with a national championship already. Top one or two winning percentages in history.
Right.
And that's a pretty good list of guys you've worked under, or worked not under.
Alongside.
You kind of worked alongside, because you actually worked under the athletic directors, which is Gene Smith and then Ross Bjork.
Right.
Those
and Andy Geiger.
Oh, yeah, Andy Geiger, sure, in the 1990s. So, Wow, that's a lineup, man.
And Jim Hart, the old St. Louis Cardinals
Yeah.
quarterback, was the AD at Southern Illinois Carbondale.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So, well, I left that all out. You went real quick before we get into some specifics.
Sure.
One of the main reasons I want to have you on, because basically you were in college athletic administration, and wow, what a time it is to be in that realm now. As in, are you kidding me? What happened now? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Every morning, that's your retort. But you went to give us a little resume. You went to Murray State.
Murray State undergraduate. Graduated with a degree in communications, media, journalism / radio, TV.
Yeah.
Graduated and didn't know what I really could do. What was I good enough at to even make a living?
Yeah.
None of those. I didn't think, to truly make a living. And then it hit me like, what does this sports information director guy do that I'd have to always go see him in order to interview Mike Gottfried, who was the Murray State coach my first year there. And then Frank Beamer was the Murray State football coach the next 3 years.
That's crazy.
I always had to talk to this guy to get approval to interview these guys. So what does he do? And so, one Saturday in January of 1984, it kind of hit me. Go talk to him. So I went and talked to him, the following week. And he said, he explained to me what the sports information office was all about. And he said, it's a great career, but to get involved, you're going to have to get yourself in an office, and nobody's going to hire you right now because you don't have any SID experience. So what you need to do is you need to go back to school, get a master's degree, stay 2 years, work on it for 2 years. And at the same time, work in a sports information office while you're getting your master's. Doesn't matter if you're getting paid or not, but just work 2 full years in an office. He says, when you're done, you're going to have a master's degree, you're going to have a bachelor's degree, you're going to have 2 years experience in an SID office, and you're going to be a lot more marketable than you are today. And I said, well, where did you go to school? He said, Ohio State. I was like, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So
who was that? You remember the guy's name? You don't remember the guy's name?
I'm trying to I can't remember exactly who it was. Now, Doug Vance, a longtime SID and Hall of Famer, in our profession. Once upon a time was at Murray State. Kenny Klein was at Murray State. Same thing. He carved his career out at Louisville. Craig Bonert was at Murray State. He's a fixture in the Olympic committee and Olympic sports. And I can't remember this guy's name, but I'm so grateful that I had that conversation, because it was like, okay, well, I'm gonna try to do this. And I got in, when I applied, borrowed $10,000 from the bank, loaded up my 71 red Torino, which I called the Red Beast, had a mattress on the hood, and drove to Ohio State in August of 1984. Spent 2 years here, and then graduated or finished up here in July of 86. My graduation ceremony was 86 in St. John Arena when Woody gave his pay forward speech. Worked at Southern Illinois University for 3 years, then Temple for 6 years, and then came back to Ohio State in 1995. And outside of a hiatus, been at Ohio State for 23 years.
Yeah. That was an interesting background to get you into this. The other interesting thing was, before we get into, like I said, some of the nuts and bolts, and we're going to do nuts and bolts even more a couple other times when you come on, so you can steer me through some tough passages. Speaking of steering through tough passages, you were, in essence, Mark Twain on a dredging boat that worked the Mississippi Delta area, and pretty much the Yazoo River. Mm-hmm. Number one, I don't need 20 minutes on it, but how do you go from being, because I worked construction my first summer out of high school, and I said to myself, you know what, Self, you got to figure something else out. You can't do this for the next 50 years, even though I learned how to frame a house, how to put a roof on. Right on down the line, you name it. I learned so much in 3 months. It was crazy. But with you end up on, was there at Murray State, was there a bulletin board with help wanted come be a Mark Twain type individual and work on a dredging boat on the Mississippi Delta, which people don't understand. Mississippi Delta pretty much starts just south of Memphis, right? I mean, geographically.
Yeah.
And there you are in the middle of where the blues. Yeah. You're on the Blues Trail there and on the Yazoo River there, man. Greenwood and all those other places.
Yeah,
Greenville.
Itabena.
Itabena.
Iuka, Mississippi.
There you go. Watch Old Brother Where Art Thou, the movie. You'll see Itabena in there. He's mentioned several times. Yeah. But how did you end up doing that?
So my mom's fifth husband. That's a story we can.
That's another podcast. That's two podcasts.
God bless her. My mom just always wanted to make sure that there was a man to take care of the kids or her. And the first four didn't work out, but Bruce certainly did. She stayed married to him for final 37 years of each of their lives.
I mean, how many times did you say, "Who's that guy"? I'm just joking.
4.
Yeah. Go ahead though.
Bruce was a civil engineer. And this was an opportunity to make good money as a summertime job. And I had worked with his company off and on, Christmas breaks, some summers, but they were down in Mississippi, deepening and widening, basically dredging the Yazoo River, making it bigger for barges and, cutting corners off, so the barges would have an easier
Real quick. Route. I grew up in first 11 years in Demopolis, Alabama, and then we moved to Lufkin, Texas in 1965. Mm-hmm. But the Tin Tom Waterway or Tin Tom Waterway, which is Tennessee River connected to the Tom Bigby River up there in northeast Mississippi, middle west Tennessee. That's where the Tom Bigby River and the Black Warrior River, which ran through Tuscaloosa, came together. They're about 55 miles south. Yeah. But I mean, we used to go watch barges go up and down this fascinating river. Fascinating thing to watch. Number two, how narrow it still was, even though it was deemed extremely safe. But y'all were in charge of basically making passage, I said, Mark Twain,
just cutting through land, deepening and widening this river.
You didn't look for gold, did you?
No, I was always on the barge, around the dredge.
Yes, the dredge.
I think it was called the Alabama.
There you go.
As a matter of fact. But it was great money. I don't know what I was making an hour. I was working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's all you did. And so making really good money and was able to save enough money to get myself through Murray State the rest of the way and still have a little bit of a cushion for later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, all the lifers, the people from the South that were, on this job working, they were all saying, "You're not going back to college. You're making good money.
Yeah.
There's no way you're going back to college." But all I knew was there's no way, I can do this for the rest of my life. I was an oiler, not very good. And then they couldn't keep a third engineer on. So they made me the third engineer and just put me alongside of the chief engineer. So I went from working 7 at night to 7 in the morning, making great money, to working 7 in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the chief engineer, and
wow.
Yeah. And every now and then I'd get on the deckhand crew, and that's when you'd have to take the piping that's in the behind the dredge, and it's dumping all of the water and the waste and the material and the sand on land. Could be a mile away, and you'd have to keep building this pipe and making it longer. I had numerous moments where I fell in the river, and that's just because I was a rookie and didn't really know what the heck I was doing. But I got through it and made some good money.
Did you wear a life vest, or did you wear one of those what they call May West?
No, I had a life vest on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow, you fell in the river.
Oh yeah.
Where did guys laugh and then throw you a line, or how did it work? They fetching you out of the water?
Mostly scoffed at me. The one time I
fell
off
rookie
on the back end of the dredge, I don't even know if anybody even knew I had fallen in, and there was a step and ladder. I got up. But when you're on the deckhand on the boat, everybody, there's 4 other guys on it, and they just scoffed.
Wow. Hey, what nightlife? What was nightlife? Well, you said you worked 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. at one point in the shifts, but what was nightlife like? Right, like I said, that was That was the what's it called? The blues highway or whatever runs.
Yeah,
all the way through that area up to Memphis, etc. I mean, did you get any nightlife, or were you just mainly sleeping?
No, I was sleeping.
Yeah, because this was hard work.
Yeah. I did find me a female friend from local, a local girl. Dated her for a while, but yeah, there wasn't outside of going out to going to Greenwood, Mississippi to grab some dinner or something like that. There wasn't much.
How did you meet this young lady, the local lady? Your wife doesn't have to hear this part.
No. It's okay. My sister, I think my sister, who I've got a sister 4 years younger than me, was down there in Mississippi. She wasn't working; she was just living with mom and Bruce at the time.
Yeah,
and I think she introduced us.
I got you, and the rest is history. We won't get into that. We won't get into all your girlfriends and stuff because we want your wife to be able to watch this.
History's behind me, so it's behind me.
Bingo.
Yeah,
that's a bingo. Real quick, what was your aspiration once you got into being a sports information director, working in that office kind of atmosphere? Did you with Mike Bassford? You and him worked together these last few years, many years at Ohio State. Now he's a sports information director. The whole deal at University of South Florida. He's down there with Brian Hartline, and obviously Ohio State hired Will Pantages from Wake Forest. You retired, Mike moved on, but I'm just wondering what was your aspiration, or did you work into career goals? Were you always hell bent on getting back to Ohio State after you got your graduate degree?
Yeah, no, and Tim, I'll tell you, as a young 6-year-old, maybe it was 5.
Yeah.
I remember always in Duluth, Minnesota, visiting my grandmother, always telling her, Graham, when I grow up, I want to go to Notre Dame and I want to be just like Howard Cosell. And the Notre Dame was there because on Sundays in the mid 1960s, you could see a half-hour replay of Notre Dame's game the day before.
Oh yeah,
Lindsey Nelson was handling the narrative.
Eventually, Paul Hornung ended up on that show, didn't he? Paul, the
probably,
former. Yeah, but go ahead.
So, but I just knew from a really young age, I like sports, and I want to, I think I want to do something in it. So I want to go to Notre Dame, and I want to be just like Howard Cosell, the biggest announcer of the era, and that's ultimately what I did. No, I didn't go to Notre Dame, but I went to a great school, Murray State, went to an even greater school in Ohio State University. And I was working in sports, which is what Cosell was doing. So I was able to fashion, a start of a career in the sports information field. And at the time, did I have aspirations? Oh, my aspirations was, wow, I'm an assistant SID now, and I get to go to baseball games and football games and basketball games, and life is good.
Yeah.
And at 24 years old, you don't really know how to progress yet. I can remember when I was, with my first job at Southern Illinois, how nervous I was, sick to my stomach, wanting to tell the head SID at Southern Illinois that I would really like to apply for this job at the University of Minnesota because I'm from Minnesota and this would be great. And I mean, I was sick to my stomach,
really, just
worrying about even telling him. And he just laughed at me and he says, yes, Jerry, you got to take care of yourself. So there wasn't, the aspirations just came, as you progressed in the field.
One of my good buddies, he had a little tough time at the end of his career. But my buddy, Rich Dalrymple, he and I ran into each other. He was the sports information director at Otterbein. And then he got to know the SID, I think at Louisville, who ended up taking the University of Miami job down in Miami, not Oxford, but Miami.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, that guy hired him as his assistant SID from Otterbein to be the assistant SID at Miami in the early mid 80s, early 80s, with Schnellenberger, but then past that, Jimmy Johnson and all that. So he ended up with a great connection with Jimmy Johnson. And next thing you know, after Jimmy Johnson takes a Cowboy job, the next year he brings Rich Dalrymple up to be his guy with the Dallas Cowboys, where he was there for like 30 years and stuff. Didn't end the way he necessarily wanted it. But the bottom line is, Rich is one of the great guys you've ever run into in your life. And like you said, it just was serendipity.
Yeah.
And serendipity can take you a long way.
Yeah. And I think also what's important is to put yourself in position for good things to happen. I did that by going to Ohio State and, and interning and working in the office and getting a master's degree, and then once I got my first job, I did certain things to make sure, that I put myself in a position for good things to happen, in the future.
Yeah. And but the main way you did that, the part you're leaving out, is you worked your butt off.
Yes.
You worked very hard. That's what I did when I was coming up. But I only worked for 2 newspapers my entire career. The Lufkin News, and for 3 years, I was the youngest sports editor when I got hired in the state of Texas of a daily newspaper when I was 19, but then moved up here, wanted to go to Ohio State. I mainly came up here because I wanted to go watch Ohio State football games. My parents had moved up here. And next thing you know, I got hired. Dick Oddie hired me in the sports department at the Columbus Dispatch because I told him I could cover high school games for you and stuff. And I did that. And then all of a sudden I was a full timer because I could lay out the paper and all that kind of stuff. But so that was serendipity. I mean, really, because I really was looking around at Springfield and Mansfield and smaller papers where I could get a job maybe when I got out of college. But my point is, I worked my butt off, and nothing ever replaces doing that. Doesn't mean you're always right. Doesn't mean you always write the world's greatest stories, greatest press releases, handle press conferences the way you should. But always you're working hard and you're working hard and trying to get better, learning from your mistakes, etc. I'm sure that was a way with you. I know it was at one point in your career, which I'm not going to touch on. But getting back to this, so dude, when I mentioned those guys, John Chaney, John Cooper, people can like John Cooper all they want. He's the second winningest coach in Ohio State football history. He's in the Football Hall of Fame. The only coach, I think, still to have won the Rose Bowl, both as a Pac-10. I think it might have been Pac-10 then, but a Pac head coach and a Big Ten coach. And then, the little tete-a-tete with Jim Trussell. You didn't work with him very long, but because there was a transition there in the sports information office, but you ended up back there. And then the Luke Fickell thing, the transition from Jim Trussell to Urban Meyer, which included interim job with Luke Fickell, which I remember that year being pretty much of a challenge on everybody. But you were back being the football sports SID. I'm not sure there were hallelujah moments there, but I think you liked where you ended up, didn't you?
Yeah. I can still remember when the administration said we want to make a change and we want you to cover football for us. And even back then, I mean, I've been in the business 20 some odd years at the time, but I could still recall, a little bit of, uneasiness because, wow, this is Ohio State football.
Yeah.
And the thing that ultimately convinced me that, I can do this was, Jared, don't worry about what you don't know about being the Ohio State football SID, because you know what you can bring to the table as the Ohio State SID.
Right.
And
right.
So that's kind
of what they told you when they hired you the first time in the 90s.
Green light.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah, they wanted a little switch up there, and they got it. You were a breath of fresh air in all kinds of ways. I'll
Thank you.
lay it up to you there. I mean, I'm not making any secret here, but I'm not castigating anybody who was before you, but I've enjoyed knowing you since I first met you. And because I could have a conversation with you. We didn't always see eye to eye. We had moments where you couldn't sports information like you wanted the sports information, and the way being on the other side, the way you want you to sports informate. Is that the right term? Sports informate?
I don't think so.
No, it's not. But anyway, but what I'm getting to here is one of the things I really liked about you was your personality. You weren't a jerk. You weren't gruff. You seemed like, even though you come to work at like 6:30 or 7 o'clock every morning and leave whenever sports were done, seemingly every day, and you had your family at home, and I was always impressed by the fact you were always there.
Yeah.
You follow my drift?
Yeah.
And of course everybody goes, well, you were always there too, Tim. I go, yeah, but it's I was there by almost choice because not everybody in the media was always there, if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
But you understand what I mean? So
Yeah.
the dedication you had to have at a place like Ohio State, no offense to Temple, but Temple wasn't a 24/7, 365. Temple basketball wasn't. It was maybe to you, but it wasn't from a national importance kind of thing, right? But once you got to Ohio State and you're doing Ohio State football, different beast.
All my jobs, though, Tim, I thoroughly enjoyed, and
Yeah.
I always wanted to be happy in my work, and I was happy in my work because I was doing what I wanted to do. I was doing what this 6-year-old Jerry would tell his grandma Jablonski that he wanted to do. And I was able to, without having any family members in front of me, go to college, pave the way, show me, what to do. I was able to carve this career in a wonderful field of communications, sports information, carved that out, and was just thoroughly um, overjoyed by being able to work in a profession where I'm going to sporting events and getting ready to go to another sporting event.
Yeah.
And I also really feel like it was really, really important to always be consistent. And, I'm not a knucklehead, so that wasn't difficult to not be, or, to be happy every day or to be in a good mood every day. But I just enjoyed work so much that, that I was going to be, happy doing it.
Yeah. Did you find though, as it went along, I mean, it's so hard to please everybody. I mean, it is crazy. It's hard to please every TV station out there, every radio outlet, every now .com outlet. The .coms came along during your tenure.
Yeah.
I mean, from nothing to begging to be in the press box to now, boy, if there weren't .coms in the press box, there'd be 8 people sitting there maybe, right? And even the people in the main media now have .coms. So, that whole era, you oversaw that. But I guess my point is, what was the toughest during those years? What was the toughest part of your job in terms of dealing with the media? And I'm not talking about, we'll talk about firings and things like that, but was it satisfying, like the immediacy of some stories, meaning TV needs you now, radio needs you now, print media? Back in the day, print media didn't, my deadline was a such and such, and I didn't have a deadline every minute like I have now, or like I had, for the last really half of my career covering Ohio State. But what was the toughest, I guess, mouth to feed in the beat? The beat.
I'll first say that whether it was radio, TV, or writer, and then when the .com, when the website started coming along, all of these reporters had different wants, needs, and demands.
Yeah.
And so, you had to figure out, how to please this group over here. And you were there, Tim. Sometimes we would have group huddle interviews with a head coach for just the radio guys.
Yeah.
And then, coach, I need you to come over here and do just the TV guys. And then we're going to do, the reporters, and that evolved. So, that was my job. I mean, I almost feel like, I was a black lab. I was a retriever. I was a dog that, people would say fetch in terms of, I need this, Jerry, I need this. And I would go get it. I would go get what they needed. That was my job. And I really, really enjoyed that. So you just had to figure out, what those wants and needs were, and then try your best to, to help them out and to secure that for them. But what I also had to realize was, everybody's not going to be in the same frame of mind that I am. I can be consistently Jerry, every day, of every year. But I know, people, sometimes they're not going to be in a good mood. Who knows what's going on, in their home life, and so you've got to understand that they might snap back a little bit, or they might not be happy with the decision. But as long as I was fair, and as long as I talked things out, as long as we, understood each other, and there was respect there, that helped, move it along.
Yeah.
And, I'll be honest, Tim, the last 15 years, I just told myself I wasn't going to get upset because a media member was upset about something. And that helped, helped my peace of mind for sure.
in your job, one of the things, and this is a tough, because most people work for somebody who tells them what to do, you know, even you got told what to do by athletic directors, et cetera, head coaches, I'm sure.
Yep.
But how that the ability to develop the ability to say no is not easy for most people. And you had to say no many times. When did you notice? Because, the thing that's always stood out about you to me is you don't take things personal, but you are personal about the way you deal with people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you follow my drift there, meaning if a guy snaps back at you, hey, well, you know what comes with the job. If I have to say no to this guy and he's upset about it, that comes with the job. I can do it in a personal way, but I'm not going to take it personal, whatever comes from this person. When did you feel comfortable doing that, saying no to Tim May, who wants to talk to Urban Meyer right now?
Yeah.
Because well, let me follow up. Most of the times, 99% of the time, you made it happen.
Yeah. Well, saying no starts with trying to say yes, in a way to get it done.
Yes.
But I'll tell you where it truly landed. The foundation of being able to say no, or to have a hard conversation, to quote Urban Meyer, he would refer to a difficult conversation as a hard conversation to have with people. Where the foundation of that with me was the relationships. I mean, I built relationships with everybody on the beat. Everybody knew that I was, I didn't treat the college reporter differently from the ESPN, reporter.
Yeah.
I built relationships naturally, and there was nothing fake, about that.
Organic.
Organically, yes. And so when you have that type of relationship with that many people, you can say no. And I mean, like every week these last couple years, during our press conferences, everybody's raising their hand. They want to get a question into Coach Day or to a player.
Yeah.
And as much as we tried, we couldn't get everybody's question asked. And there'd be some looks, but they were respectful looks, and hey, I'll get you next time. I promise. So it really, the ability to say no, I think, at least for me, was helped along the fact that I had built a really good foundation, an interpersonal foundation, a friendship, so to speak. Even though we weren't on the same sides, we were also friends, and professionals, and that helped that.
When you came along in the mid '90s, there were quite a few of us covering Ohio State, but it wasn't like it is today. Right. The number. I mean, right. is the number of quote beat people doubled or tripled? I mean, what you
probably doubled since the '90s.
Yeah,
Tim, and I don't know if people realize. Oh, I'm getting
that's
a
right.
little cramp.
Yeah,
that's all right. That's okay. All right, though.
When you tell the truth, that's what happens. Yeah. That's why I call them the truth from Duluth. We didn't need to know that, by the way. Go ahead.
We don't just credential at Ohio State anyone and everyone who's got a Substack,
a shingle,
or a podcast, or a website, and you just can't. So even though a lot of individuals that have those feel like they should be credentialed, the whole goal and the purpose of credentialing is obviously to get the people that are doing this as their job. This is their job.
Yeah.
And it's an important job because Ohio State athletics has like 12 million fans in Buckeye Nation. They want to read about Ohio State sports. We're a conduit to help make that happen. And you guys, the pros, the people that are doing this job for a living, you have to have a professional environment. You can't be asking questions over, one another. We can't have rooms filled with people that are just, hobbyists, trying to do this job. And so, it hasn't ballooned as it potentially could. And that's twofold.
Yeah.
to create a professional environment for those reporters and announcers and broadcasters who are covering Ohio State on a daily basis consistently, and also to have, and even probably more importantly, to have a professional environment for our coaches and our student athletes.
As you're standing up there in front of us, like in the team meeting room where we had finally the last many years, we've had the weekly press conferences with Ryan Day, and maybe post game and things like that. Did you ever marvel at some of the guys who never ask a question? Like,
no, because
you're probably, it's probably a relief you didn't have to call on. But I mean
that
I've always thought that was very odd, because I've seen a few people through the years who never ask a question, and but you know, like me, I'm never shy about if you throw it open to the group, I'm going to try to ask a question. But I've always found it to be interesting of people who don't ask questions, but then remark about questions that were asked, or they take, like a line of questioning I might be going down, or Austin Ward or somebody else, and develop it as their quote story.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do. And
I don't know why I asked that question. I've just been always curious about why they're in journalism.
Some do and some don't.
Yeah.
And there are people, long time reporters, that don't ask questions, but I was okay with that.
Okay.
Because they're good people. And, and I don't think they were, ever trying to steal anybody's thunder or anything like that. But yeah, it made things a little bit easier when you got 23 hands raised and, you want to try to get to them, but you also got 10 people there that, they're just content to listen and tweet. Maybe.
I always preferred the shout over everybody else way of doing things, but that was, I consider that my strength.
But you're 6'2" and you're you're taller, and
it was loud,
and you were in the profession of
I was loud
long enough that you felt comfortable doing that.
I was loud and I had a particular voice, or whatever. But no, I just do that out there because I wanted to see what you would say. Like, to me, I would find that curious about somebody who's covering the beat but never seems to want to ask a question. And the other one I always like, well, Tim took my question. I'm going, nobody passes questions out at the door. You know what I mean? As you're coming in the room, and I'm going, wait a minute, you came to an Urban Meyer press conference and you had one question. You know what I mean? You usually have 400, right? And you try to keep it to one. I appreciate you being, I don't know, sympathetic toward me or whatever during those times. I didn't mean to ask multiple questions at
times. That. Tim, there you brought a levity and everything was good. I mean, I enjoyed the press conferences. And
hey, by the way, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yes, you do. You ask a lot of questions, and all good. They're good questions. But we also had the relationship where you'd call me whenever you felt like you needed to, and I can tell you this much. Nobody else called me, and said, Jerry, just tell me Braxton Miller walked off the practice field.
Yeah.
Back in 2014.
That was a day.
Boy, that was a day.
That was a day because I knew what the answer was. You know what I mean? It's like a lawyer know the answer before you ask the question and stuff. And boy, you talk about your phone lighting up. That was my phone. Yours probably too. When I broke that story in the middle of the evening, and I had every talk show and known to man calling, trying to get me on the radio and stuff. But that was when Braxton Miller's shoulder went out. And I guess Urban sort of lost it there too a little bit, in the way it was explained to me, because it's your starting quarterback. You've got a hell of a football team, and boom, he's gone. And I immediately in my mind, JT Barrett was going to be the guy.
Well, earlier in the day, Tom Herman, he was available for interviews and said JT has moved ahead of Cardell slightly. I don't think he gave a reason why. It's just it just seems like the offense moves is smoother with him.
But by 3 that afternoon, everybody had written their story for the next day about JT Barrett, Tom Herman talking about him, how good he was, blah, blah, blah. We'd come on, pecking order at quarterback and all, and then boom. I'm sure everybody was having a nice lunch until I ruined it for them. Hey, but that's another story. We, you and I had to call you on many occasions for certain things like that, breaking stories. So like, the guys that were suspended for the start of the 2015 season, for example, and things like that, because I didn't want to get scooped on something I knew was happening.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? But by the way, real quick, I want to go back to something, because I do want to talk to you about the Ohio State individual head coaches, what you liked about them. You know what I mean? But Frank Beamer, my buddy Jeff Snook wrote a book on Frank Beamer, spent like a year with him for the most part, off and on and stuff. And Frank Beamer's one of the, I don't know about when you dealt with him for 3 years when you were at Murray State, but he's one of the great guys ever, isn't he? Am I wrong about that?
No, I didn't have any type of relationship with him at all. Interviewed him a few times after a game.
But was he conducive to being interviewed?
Yes. I can remember, and not even doing it after a game, like he would come outside of Roy Stewart Stadium on a Monday morning, and
those were the good old days, man.
An interview with him. And then through the years, I've had a number of occasions where I've been able to bump into him. When I was at Temple, and Temple was in the Big East football conference, Virginia Tech was as well. And I'd introduce myself, and we realized we had some mutual friends, and so wonderful gentleman, very, very, nice person, great coach. But I didn't have much of a relationship with him.
No, but that once again, you had to deal with him a little bit, doing your beat, so to speak. God, I wish you were from Austin P, because I love that flies open, let's go P line. But y'all played them every year. Y'all were in the same league.
Yep.
Was that the Ohio Valley Conference?
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But back to you. Okay. John Cooper, just in a nutshell, meeting him, etc. What was your first take of Coach Cooper, and how did y'all get along?
That was back in the late 90s. I was probably.
Well, you came along in what, 95, right?
Yeah, 95. Yeah. And then
Eddie George's Heisman year. Is that coincidence?
Yeah, no, not that. No, I wish. So I had a couple years under Steve Snap to get to know Coach Cooper. Yeah. Gentleman, friendly, willing to do media, friendly with the media.
Yeah.
Can't ask for much more than that. And
truthful with the media too. I mean, that's
sure.
Yeah.
Very true.
I guess what I'm asking here is that what is the biggest difference? And this was even back in the 90s. But what was the biggest difference between working with a head football coach and working with a head basketball coach like John Chaney? If you follow my difference, my question, meaning John Chaney. Yeah, I guess you had, every beat writer. I guess were there 3 Philadelphia papers in? Definitely 2.
Daily News and the Inquirer.
Were they there at every practice? Did they have a guy there at every practice?
No, but they could be there.
Yeah.
Chaney was open. I mean, Stephen A. Smith was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer at the time.
Wow,
for a year or two covering Temple basketball. Totally different worlds. Temple basketball, college basketball,
example.
And Ohio State.
Give some examples.
Football. Well,
I know everybody knows that, but I just want to know from the inside looking out.
Yeah. So Ohio State football, I have to have my hand on the pulse, every day. I have to know what's going on internally with the program, and I have to know, all right, what's going on externally here? Is anything going on in the SEC? Is any coach, said something? Are there any issues out there that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, where are the fires?
Back in the early 90s with Temple basketball, no, you didn't have to do that kind of thing. Now there were things going on in the world that that didn't even pertain to sports that would resonate with Chaney and with Temple basketball. But he was willing. I mean, he had open locker rooms after basketball games. I mean, what coach, will do that anymore?
Nobody,
not many.
Yeah.
And which gets to something too. You're seeing more and more athletes and coaches like not doing interviews, and that concerns me a little bit in the profession that we're in. And I'll tell you one other, just in the difference between, you know, schools and Ohio State. When I had just been promoted at Temple in 1995, early in like February of 1995, to being the assistant athletic director for communications, and 8 months later, Steve Snap, longtime SID here for us, loved him. He hired me 3 times. He calls me and he says, "Jer, I got an open position." Bob Goldring was leaving and
Yeah.
to go to the Ohio High School Athletic Association. And Steve said, "Jer, I got 100 resumes here, and the resume I want isn't." And I'm like, "You don't even say it, Steve." I hadn't talked to him in 9 years or so, but he convinced me to come in and interview, and I did, and then going back to that sick feeling of having to tell someone that, hey, I want to leave, or I'm going to leave. I went down to Coach Chaney's office, which was in the basement of McGonigal Hall, and told him what was transpiring and what I wanted to do. And he was very honorable, and he was very sincere, and very gracious with his time. And he said, "Jer, if you've thought this through, if you've got your pros and cons of if you stay here or if you go, and the way it ends up is it the best thing for you is to go to Ohio State, then you got to do it,
Yeah.
and you can't look back, and you can't have any regrets." And he goes, "Heck," he said, "Ohio State's silence is louder than Temple's roar." So
What
that
a
was
line.
that was just the
Yeah.
difference in what I was what I was experiencing. I was going from a world that was this big to a world that was just Buckeye Nation gigantic.
Yeah.
Big.
But that had to hit you two or three ways, but the two ways were, yeah, he's right. And then, yeah, he's right.
Yeah, and I
You know
was
what I mean?
I was relieved that I had basically gotten his blessing that it's
Yeah.
okay. If this is what's best for you, then you got to do it, and you can't have any
But I mean, what he
regrets.
actually said to you,
Yeah.
their silence is mightier than the Temple's greatest roar.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing there now, of course, but my point is that had to hit you two ways. Like, yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
and then yeah, you're right. Meaning, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself
Right.
into?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And lions eat their young sometimes. No, I'm just joking. I hope they don't. I guess they do, don't they? But that's a podcast for another day. But my point is, you end up at Ohio State. You endured. Yeah, like I said, you had your little sabbatical, and there was a problem one time with the preseason press guide that had something get into it that y'all would prefer not to, and y'all have kept that secret all these many years. But you paid the price for it. But you came back. You endured. You came back and at Ohio State. But my point is, every day you get used to being in a pressure cooker, but it's still a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So how did you get used to being in the pressure cooker?
I just
did your deal.
Well, paying attention to what you're doing and doing a good job at what you're doing and looking ahead and preparing and making sure you're ready for, all right, what's coming tomorrow, what's coming next week. And and then through the years, you obviously you become more and more comfortable in what you're doing, and that pressure cooker doesn't settle down at all, because new things are happening. Suddenly there's the internet, and then there's Twitter. I mean, I can remember being at the Fiesta Bowl in was it 2008 or 9 when we were playing Texas, and some national reporters were in front of us and they were tweeting, and someone said, what are you doing? He says, "Oh, you just tweet. You got 75 characters you tell people what you're doing." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I'm going for a walk, so I'm going to tweet that." And then people care about that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So then you got Twitter coming on, and then you've got social media, and just there's it's not, and then obviously what's going on today with NIL and the transfer portal.
Yeah. I'm gonna have you back to talk about some of this stuff, but I did want to touch on a couple things. Number one, you were around when Jim Tressel was asked to resign. When Jim Tressel, no matter how they put it out, he was forced to resign. You were around when Urban Meyer. The whole thing went down in 2018, and that usually it's players that something happens, in that interim in July before the season. You always look for something to happen when it came to Ohio State football. That's just the way it was.
Yeah.
I'm talking about from my side looking at it. You were there when Urban actually finally decided to retire, and Ryan Day took the job. You weren't there. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, you weren't there during the early 2000s in football.
Correct.
Dealing with football when some of the Maurice Corrett things went down, et cetera. When the TAT 5, I was
there with that.
Yeah, you were around with the TAT 5.
Yeah.
From a reporter standpoint, you're going, oh my God, what? You know what I mean? I'm talking about when you're covering this and maybe breaking some stories on it and all this kind of stuff. It just, whatever you got scheduled for the day just went for the week, just went out the door and stuff. What is it like being on the other side of that, where university's obviously trying to protect itself? You're trying to a certain extent, protect the athletes and the coaches, as in with the Urban Meyer episode in 2018 in Chicago at the preseason meetings. But what is it like from your vantage point of, that all of us reporters are going to want to know, we're going to want to talk to A, B, C, or D. We're not necessarily, you had a good way of most of the time getting us access or statements, because like you said, you can't let 40 beat writers in a guy's front door,
Yeah.
But what is it like when you're dealing with that? Because that wasn't on your agenda that day, if you follow, or that week.
Yeah.
What was it like from the inside? Let's take a specific. When Jim Tressel was brought back and told, this is it, we're moving on, we're going to make Luke Fickell the interim head coach, et cetera. What was that like? It was right about the same time as right now. It was because I had covered the Indianapolis 500. I had covered the Indianapolis 500 the day before. We knew stuff. I almost said a bad word there. We knew stuff was coming down. And I was sitting outside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center at 7:30 in the morning, even though I'd covered the Indy 500 the day before, because I knew stuff was coming down and hoping to run into somebody, you know what I mean, and break the story. Or we were going to break the story.
Yeah, you were around the Woody that day.
Oh, I definitely was.
Tim, what was it like? It was surreal.
Well, you got a phone call first or something. I mean, right?
Yes, and it was unbelievable. I got a call the night before, and this was Memorial Day of 11, and I got a call the night before, be in my office at 6:30 a.m.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, I knew that, but go ahead.
And then that day, it was surreal. It was unbelievable. And I'll leave it at that. But then in any of these situations, this is what our job is as communicators. We have got to honestly and truthfully and transparently,
convey,
or what is the situation.
Yeah.
And, we've always had, it might not be written down, but there's always a protocol. Is this truly a crisis? Yes. Okay. Let's get university communications involved. Do we need to get, and then the university communications would decide, do we need to get legal counsel involved?
Yeah.
And then back in the athletic department, it's, let's get this whole story. Let's find out exactly what is happening here. What should our next steps be? Do we need a statement? Do we need to have a press conference? So there was always a protocol in place that regardless what the crisis or potential crisis was that we were enduring at the moment, we had not a schedule, we had
a list, a checklist, pretty much. You went through
of what to, how to handle this moving forward.
Yeah. I remember my buddy Rich Dalrymple. I mean, when he was assistant SID down at Miami, for example, that's an example. They were always big on trying to be, when they found out somebody had gotten in trouble, which happened, at University of Miami back then. they wanted to be ahead of the game, meaning they wanted, if Jimmy Johnson need to make a comment, don't wait till somebody calls you on it. Boom. You guys were pretty close to that in a lot of times, meaning, all right, we've already got a response from Coach A, blah, blah, blah. And that's called staying ahead of the game, but you can't always do that.
Right.
There are always going to be surprises whenever stuff comes down. Like the Tat 5 deal, that was always going to be a Pandora's box. Once that box was opened, there were going to be things, right, and stuff. I guess when you meet with like Gene Smith or at that point Jim Trussell and stuff, do you remember being on pins and needles, or do you just remember thinking, okay, I'm going to hear something, but we've got to filter it to we've got to make sure we're telling the right story. You don't tell all details of the story. You follow me,
right.
But do you remember that being you being on edge? You know what I mean? Of finally, because you ended up being pretty much the final filter on a lot of that.
Yeah, no, not so much on edge, but cautious and and looking at what's happening. I mean, trying to make sure that I know what's on the outside externally. What are people saying? What are they needing? And you can pick up what you need to do internally from a communications perspective. A lot of times based on what's being said on the outside. I don't recall, there's been a number of situations. I don't recall, being, that nervous or alarmed or on pins and needles. And again, I think it's because, there has been great communication, within the building, for years, whether it was something good or whether it was something adverse going on. And I just knew that the protocols and the systems that we had in place, we're gonna take over and allow us to share the news or to get through this situation, in the best way that we could.
All right, this is a fair question I'm going to ask you, but always in the back of your mind, but in the back of everybody's mind, is it what do they call that? What do they call it in the NFL? Protect the shield. You understand what that means? Meaning, was there always, y'all basically Jim Trussell, the straw that broke the camel's back was supposedly a story that was coming out in Sports Illustrated, which turned out to be literally nothing. I think what it added to the thing was that they also got free fried chicken, which was interesting, and maybe one other thing, but there was nothing. My point is though, is with an institution like Ohio State, is it protect the institution finally? Is that what's at the, you know what I mean? When things like that happen, as you look back on it now, is it protect the institution? In other words, tell the truth, but protect the institution. Is that a core value of the approach? Is that a fair assessment?
I'd say in situations or at times. Yes, but there's such a human element,
right?
In all of these that, there's also a, we can do this, to help this individual, to protect this individual, at the same time of protecting the integrity of the university.
Yeah. Hey, we'll touch on some other things later, but I do want to ask this. Of all the comings and goings that happened while you were at Ohio State, because, how fans want to fire a guy when he loses 4 straight times to Michigan, I mean, despite his record, blah, blah, and he goes on and wins the national championship. What do you think about me now? Right. What has 2 thumbs and feels good? But do you remember ever having a moment I know you're the truth from Duluth. Of course, you'll be honest with me, where you shed a tear or you just had a pause where something happened, you were close to a guy, close to a player or a coach or somebody, that emotionally you felt something when that decision had to be made? You know what I mean? That this person is no longer a part of the Ohio State family. I think a lot of these things you saw coming from 10 miles away. Most of the situations.
Yeah, and those situations, you know,
because you develop relationships with these fellas.
Sure.
And women.
Yeah, but you know, but the I
professional
wasn't swinging the hammer. You know, I wasn't making that decision or even making that call.
I got you. But you've developed a relationship, a working relationship with somebody, and you kind of go, man, I didn't see that coming, or you know what I mean? I mean, it's like I don't know how to explain it to you. It's that wow, I thought everything was gravy here.
Yeah, I've had that thought, but I don't want to get into it.
Yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. I mean, is that kind of? But does it make you a little more? I don't know. Jaded's not the right term, but you finally you can't be. It's not like your wife, you know, leaving or something. I mean, it's you have to make the relationships. The more you're in that job, the more they have to be professional.
Yeah.
Right. And you feel good when they win.
Yeah.
Right. And you get the ring, you know, maybe you'll get a bonus. No, I'm just messing with you there. We won't go into that. But somebody else comes along and now you're working with somebody else.
Yeah.
And that guy is different, or young woman or lady is different, but very good at their job.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? The idea that this is his job or nobody's, you know, like with Woody.
Yeah.
Woody gets canned, and this guy named Earl Bruce comes along. Who the hell is he? Well, he went 11-1, almost won the national championship his first year, you know, following Woody. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, don't ever think the institution can't survive without you, I guess is the point, right?
Right. And that's the nature of, you know, of many professions, but certainly of athletics.
Yeah.
Where, you know, one day somebody's going to be a champion and be here, and the next day they might not be here. And there's going to be a new person, you know, coming in, and you know, and then you start from square one in terms of building relationships. And you know, I think I've told you this before. I mean, you know, my whole purpose, you know, or not, you know, a big purpose of mine was to always try to make things as easy as possible for the head coach.
Yeah.
They got to coach a team. They got to win games. They're the ones that have got all the pressure on. You know, I've got to do the best I can do to make this communications, to make media relations as easy as possible for them, so they can concentrate on winning games.
The last thing on this thing before we go, because you're going to be on many other times. I'm going to say many because you know, you and I have always had a great relationship. Number one, number two, I always loved talking to you. Whether it was recorded or not, 99 times out of 100, it was not recorded. But you saw Ryan Day thrust into the cauldron the first 3 games of 2018 and be a head coach for the first time in his life. And then you saw Ryan Day accept the mantle. You accept the mantle of being the head coach at Ohio State, whether it may look glorious. A lot of people out there who, whatever, but there is so much weight, pressure, whatever you want to call it, involved in being the head coach of Ohio State, like many other big time college football powerhouse institutions. What is the coolest thing? I'm going to narrow it down here for you, so you don't have to like meander like I'm meandering in the question. What is the coolest thing you've seen change about Ryan from that day in August of 2018 when he was named the interim head coach while Urban Meyer served a 3-game suspension to now as a head coach who has gone through being named a head coach full-time for the first time, gone through some really tough losses on the field where he could have maybe had 1 or 2 more national championships. You follow my drift there. Then won one, but the 4-game losing streak to Michigan, which, you know, you can't do anything about it until the next year, but that's all people want to somehow talk about, and how that means you're not good enough, which we all know is baloney. Now that you're out of it, you know it's baloney. But to become a guy who dealt with COVID, the NIL transfer portal, just right on down the line. Now third uncles are part of the conversation.
Right.
You know what Urban thought about third uncles, meaning people who on the fringe of some athletes' athletic career. Now all of a sudden they're calling shots or something. My point is, what is the coolest thing you've seen develop or transform, if that's the right term, about Ryan Day? Because no head coach in history has run the gamut of all those things I just said like he has.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's really, really cool is the fact that he has become a world-class coach. He started out here back in 2018.
17 is when he first came.
Yeah, started in 17, and then he was handed
interim head coach.
Was handed the team. In his second year, and there were other head coaches, former head coaches on our coaching staff.
Yes,
that couldn't have been easy. And he was in charge of the team, having never been in charge of a team at that level, before. He listened. He asked questions. In 2019, when he took over, same thing. Just growing into the role. And those first 4 or 5 years of Coach Day's, they were not easy, not because of anything that he did or didn't do, but because of external things. Like you said, he was named the interim coach. COVID hit. There was just things happening and going on outside of the Woody,
of your control.
Out of his control. And he's having to navigate these, and he did that really, really well.
Yeah.
To the point where, he's, in anyone and everyone's, top 2 or 3, of the best coaches in college football right now.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a testament to, to his strength, to who he is, as a person, who he is as a culture builder, which I don't know, I haven't been around other, programs, obviously, like I've been with Ohio State, but the culture that Ohio State has, is directly a result of who Ryan Day is. And it is as good as you're going to find anywhere. Yeah. And it's why we're the program that we are. So the fact that he's, he just kind of, stacked, that you hear stacking good days after good days. He stacked good days after good days and years after years, to become the coach that he is.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny thing about him is he's still approachable. I mean, he's still, I don't know how to explain it to people. He's still a human being.
Yep.
Who's pulled in 5, 8, 12, 15 different directions. And yet, Clay and I had him and RJ, his son, on a podcast here several weeks ago, just before RJ made his visit to Northwestern and committed to Northwestern. Wow. What an achievement. Ryan never got that shot with a big time school, with a major college Power 4 type school. But my point is, he was just sitting there being a dad, but also he was the head coach of Ohio State. And, he was very engaged in our conversation.
Yeah.
And he's like that almost every time I've been around him. I was telling my wife the other day, I said, I've been lucky to be in the profession I'm in because I have the right to ask anybody almost anything I want to ask them, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
But not, and my big line about Urban Meyer was, don't ask Urban Meyer a question you don't want to know his answer to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's going to tell you.
Answer.
Yeah. And, but it's just really weird when I look back on my career of talking to coaches and players after losses, because it's considered, but especially coaches, is considered not optional. It's considered required that you get to talk to David Malukas when he got passed by Felix Rosenquist in the closest finish in Indy 500 history the other day. That you just go and get to talk to this guy at the lowest moment of his, well, not lowest moment, he finished second in the Indy 500, but understand one of the toughest emotional moments, talking with Ryan after those 4 straight losses to Michigan, that he knows that, I mean, I can keep doing that back and forth thing of what the thoughts are out there. Right. but he still, you know, it's like the fans expect some kind of mea culpa, like we'll get them next time, or not. They don't. That's not good enough. Coach, where did you screw up, and why did you screw up? When in fact you can't do anything about what just happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I've just always thought that, but I know that, you know, you had a personal relationship with all these coaches, and did y'all ever discuss those kind of like moments of how to like sort of handle them? You know, there have been a couple times, maybe next time you're on, we'll name a couple of those where people didn't handle them the way y'all had discussed handling them, which, you know, frying pan fire, right?
Yeah.
So to speak. And sometimes a D on the end of it. But you're telling me, I mean, like with Ryan, for example, did y'all spend at least a little bit of time, because his day is so structured, where you could like just say, hey, expect to get this question, or, you know, I got a sense, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You can answer a question.
That was a big part of my responsibility, to make sure he was aware of what potentially could get asked, of what, you know, what's brewing out in college football that, you know, that may get inserted into, you know, his press conference.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, you know, there were, you know, for the most part, in front of every media opportunity he did or players did.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't you know, it wasn't this 15-minute or 30 minutes, you know, let's talk about, you know, everything that's going to happen.
Let's focus, let's go this way.
Yeah. I mean, because they're pros too. I mean, the coaches are pros. They've got, you know, and they're, you know, they know what they're talking about. And
but like you're saying, they're not on Twitter all day. They're not
so,
looking at
this is,
social
you know,
media.
And you know, some of the tactics that I'd use, you know, hey, what do you think he's going to get asked today? I'd ask a handful of reporters that, and invariably, you know, those questions were the ones that got asked, and yeah, coach knew in advance, like, you know, these three questions are, you know, they're kind of tough questions.
And then Clay would come out of left field with something.
Yeah. I wasn't there. I didn't interview him.
I'm just trying to throw Clay in there so he knows he's not here, but not forgotten. But anyway, you're just looking for a response anyway, a reaction, whatever you want to call it. Hey, Jerry, we're out of time. We actually ran over what I would like to be, but like you and I both know, we're both sitting here going, man, he didn't ask me this, he didn't ask me that. And I'm going, I didn't ask him this, and I didn't ask him that. Because, you know, we can come back on and talk about some specific things. But the next time you're on, I want to talk to you about just, we didn't get to it, this era for sports administrators is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, who knows if this, you know, this SCORE Act or whatever is going to get passed, or the new version of it that Ted Cruz and another senator put together. But that's just their version. You know, who knows what's going to get tacked on, tacked out, hacked out. Maybe a spending bill will be added to it. No, I'm just joking. But you understand what I'm saying? Dude, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that it has come down that the NCAA is such an organization that the only way to save it is going to be with federal law, a federal act. What are we talking about?
And Tim, I want you to know, in retirement, I wake up in the morning and I'm really, really happy that I don't have to dig into this article or that article to try to figure out what is going on. And it's very comforting to have a cup of coffee and sit down and read The Gales of November by John U. Bacon.
There you go.
I'm on book number 3 in retirement. So.
Hey, did you read his Halifax, The Great Halifax Explosion?
No, but I think
what a book. I mean,
the Gales is.
I haven't read the Gales yet, but I'm going to, because I mean, I've had, you know, John U. Bacon is one of my favorite people of all time.
Yep.
And boy, does he put the effort into it. And his New York Times bestseller about coaching a youth hockey team is unbelievable, and ran so many. I may still be on the best times, the bestseller list, you know, with New York Times bestseller list and other bestseller lists. But the guys you've run into, man, we'll do that one of these days. We'll get together and talk about people you've run into who are like cooler than you thought they were going to be, and maybe a couple who weren't. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen,
Tim, thank you for having me. First
heck yeah.
You know, and I don't think we're going to be able to do another one because, you know, people have dropped off.
No, they haven't dropped off. That's why I saved the best for last, so to speak. But number one, number two, here's the thing. I don't expect you ever from your profession, you don't sign an NDA, but there were personal moments with everybody I just named with you that sometimes are, it's really, why do people necessarily need to know all of that? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people aren't always angelic behind the scenes. Let's leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
But maybe we'll touch on a few of them next time you come back in. I'll get you a little bit of, Johnny Walker Red or something like that, or Johnny Walker. Is it Johnny Walker Black? Which one's the best one?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Yeah, your deal is an old fashioned.
An old fashioned.
Yeah.
The Dublin Village Tavern.
Dublin Village Tavern. You can meet him there. What, 3 nights a week?
No, not that.
I've been there. Hey, what do you think about me though? Kind of swore off alcohol a long time ago and stuff. I might have a beer on very rare occasions, but somebody I know know and love, had a DUI, and that was like the 15th person I knew that.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what? That don't need to happen to me. Not that I would do that.
Yeah.
Very often, but I get along well when I'm at the Dublin Tavern. I can have a diet. If they have Diet Dr. Pepper, I'm at my best. I can have a Diet Coke and shoot the bull with anybody. I don't need lubrication.
Yeah. And it's interesting in retirement, Tim, health,
yes,
is really becoming prevalent and
paramount.
I don't have to think about work and NIL and all these score racks and all these things that are going on.
So you're in good shape, man.
So I'm thinking about my health, and everything you see that, you just think about it and it's on your screen suddenly, alcohol, no, giving up alcohol. So, I'm not at the DVT, more than once a week. And even if that, and if I am, it's 2 and done, and that's it.
Hey, one last quickie before you go. How many times have Will Pantages is now the sports information director for football.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of divorced it all and stuff. When you left there, I think you were just the guy over everything finally.
Yep.
Which was, 36 sports, crazy. You had a hell of a staff, great guys, but not as many people as you could have used.
Right.
Let's leave it at that. That's very well, puts it very well. But the point is it, like I asked a while ago, is it humbling also to know that life still goes on when you're not part of it?
No, it's not humbling because, that is, that
is life,
and that's, and here's, I'll end it on this. I picked up this quote from the internet off of a t-shirt, and it is so me. It said, "Life happens, music helps," and I'm a music man.
That's exactly right. The truth from Duluth, Gerald Emig. Jerry, thank you once again for coming on the Tim May Show, featuring usually Clay Hall.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me, Tim.
Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, we will see you then.